Welcome to the Loved Called Gifted podcast. This is your place to come for musings about spirituality, identity and purpose. I'm your host, Catherine Cowell. So I'm really delighted to be with Howard Jones in Cobridge.
Yes.
So do you want to introduce yourself?
Of course, yeah. Okay, I'm Howard and my wife Iona and I moved here to Cobridge in 2009. So we've been here about 13 and a half years now. I'm a Baptist minister. Before moving here, I'd been the pastor in charge of two Baptist churches, one in the Cotswolds, one in Solihull. So I'd done 21 years of doing that. And in the lead up to our move, we'd sort of started to think that maybe it's time for a change, to do something different. Both of my previous churches, I'd gone to a church that was small and it had grown. Both churches are still alive, which is rather nice to know. So Iona asked, "Do you want to do it? Find a little church and go there and build it up?" I says, "No, not. I think what I'd like to do is just go somewhere and start with absolutely nothing. Start absolutely from scratch." And that was an interesting thought, but we sort of explored it and eventually we linked up with a organisation called Urban Expression, which has lots of small teams around the country doing just that kind of thing. It's not just urban anymore. They do them sometimes in rural areas, but I think the chief characteristic is that they're places where the church is not thriving.
Yeah.
So Urban Expression helps and supports and enables and trains people who feel called by God to go into places like that and just say, let us go there and see what the Spirit will do. So that's what we felt, and they seemed like a right fit for us. So we came here in 2009, just Iona and me. Having done 21 years of busy Baptist ministry, we started, as I said, with just this house that we're sitting in Cobridge.
So going back a bit, what was it that drew you into Baptist ministry in the first place?
Well, I think actually I became a Christian in my teens, bit before my 15th birthday, and I was in a large, thriving evangelical Anglican church in the outer suburbs of London. I just enjoyed the whole thing of the Bible and speaking and teaching and that kind of thing. And I had this picture of one day being a minister. I did actually explore Anglican ministry when I was a teenager, and they very sensibly said, go do something else first. And so I did. I went to university. I became a music teacher, which was a very, very bad fit for me. I just wasn't fitted for teaching in a secondary school at all. I was the wrong person for it. I feel sorry for the poor kids I taught, or rather more accurately failed to teach. And at that time I was playing in a band. We were living in Slough. We looked around for a church and we found Slough Baptist Church, and it just seemed like a really good fit for us emotionally and theologically and everything, and we just sort of liked it. And so I was married to Iona by then, and she said, "Look, is this what you want to do, being in the band for the rest of, she says, "Well, no." I said, "All I ever really wanted to do is be the minister of a church." And then her jaw hit the floor. And so I suppose when we explored ministry, it was in the Baptist church. I think often, people tend not to go into particular denominations for denominational reasons. It's largely because they've found a church and they feel comfortable there, and so that's the sort of shape of the church they go into.
So the desire for ministry, to be a church minister, was was running through you since your teenage years.
Yeah.
And exactly what colour of church was less important?
Yeah, with desire to see the movement and the gifts of the Holy Spirit. And
so you went to the Cotswolds?
Yes, I know. That was weird, wasn't it? Because there was the last place on earth we thought we'd end up. We went to train at Regent's Park in Oxford. When our daughter was 5 weeks old, we moved there. We thought we'd probably end up somewhere, exciting and groovy. And I went out on a preach in my first year to this little tiny church out in the Cotswolds in a place called Chipping Campden, which is this beautiful Cotswold, size of a village, but it calls itself a town. Yeah. And in this little tiny Baptist church with about 20 or 30 mainly elderly people, but I just loved them. And at the end of the service, one of them said, "We have to see when you finish training, if maybe we'd be ready to have a minister there." But they didn't have enough money to have a minister. They called me in my second year, so I went through the rest of my training knowing I was going to that church, and it was actually a great place to start. I think if I'd thrust straight into some urban setting, then I think I'd have been quickly overwhelmed.
Yeah.
So I just started there.
So what did you discover about what kind of minister you were, and what the sort of...
It's funny, I'm in my sort of the latter half of my 60s now, and it's funny when you get to that age, you do start, an awful lot of it is kind of looking back and think, oh my goodness, did I do that? Oh, did I say that? Oh my god, I did, didn't I? But I suppose really I'm a performer. One of my gifts and skills is in storytelling, performing, and preaching, and worship leading. It's not that they are a performance, but they both require performance skills to click. Do you know what I mean? The difference. There are people who just do it to show off, and I've always had this paranoid fear. Oh, I'm just showing off. Actually, there is something about projecting. That's what brings us a sermon and actually a worship session alive. Martin Lloyd-Jones used to say a boring preacher is a contradiction in terms. If they're boring, they're not preaching.
So the preaching and the kind of the performing and bringing life to something in order to connect with people?
Definitely, yeah. So I know that's largely where my sort of skill set lies. That's a big part of me. I still absolutely love storytelling. I've always loved storytelling.
Yeah.
And I loved reading to my kids. I loved reading to my granddaughter, reading stories and doing the voices and all that kind of stuff. It's magic to me. I love it.
Yeah. So what else do you think you discovered about where your gifts and your passions lie in that first church?
You have to build up other skills in areas that where they're not so prevalent. So there are people whose whole personality and skill set is just loves sitting with people, chatting and listening. There's a very pastoral type of thing, and that was one of the things that I had to work a bit more at.
Yeah.
And organising. There's a lot of organising, a lot of church ministries organising people. Obviously, you have to work on those other parts of the ministerial life that. Yeah. But everyone is different, and we've all got different high areas and low areas.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
It does. It makes perfect sense. So you were in the Cotswolds for how many years? For 7 years.
7 years, and then started to think, no, it's time for the church as well, for me to move.
Yeah.
We went to Alton, which is part of Solihull, the posh part of Birmingham. You could call it. We in order to get a house, we had to live over the border in Birmingham. A B27 postcode was a lot cheaper than a B90 postcode. And again, it had been a plant from another thriving Baptist church, and it had gone through a bit of a difficult time, and just wanted someone to bring them together and encourage them. They like me and I like them, so we I suppose we have to bring recognise the work of the Lord in that too. But
yes, yeah.
yeah, it was a good fit, and we started there, and I was actually there for 14 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think when we were talking before we started recording, you said that you'd seen some growth in both of those churches.
Oh yeah, definitely. Both churches grew, and yeah, I'd say thrived. Yeah, so that was wonderful to see.
I'm wondering if there are sort of moments of things that you look back at and you think that thing that we did was really good, was successful, was...
In both churches, I did sort of encourage the church at one point to do a sort of particularly concentrated mission time.
Yeah.
Those are project times, but I don't think I would actually say, oh yeah, I remember in this particular year we did this particular thing, and that was a high point. It was basically in each church there was just that long process of doing what you're doing and keeping going, and just trying to keep the church well fed and enthused and encouraged, and yeah.
And as somebody who likes to perform, taking the stage every week.
Well, yes. There's a funny kind of two-edged thing. It's one of those things you're not supposed to admit to in Christian circles, that you kind of enjoy that, or you're supposed to say, "Oh, well, I'm a bit ashamed." Yes, I'm afraid I do like to do that, but
so we'd prefer to have people stand up and preach who don't really like it, who are bringing an element of performance, but only because they have to, rather than because it's something that you're talented at.
Aren't we a crazy mixed up bunch? Yeah, it's more important who you are to try and walk humbly with God, keep an ear open to the Spirit, and I think that's actually the whole shooting match, really. That at the end of the day, that is really the thing that counts. It's character.
Yes, and having known you a bit for a while, I was nowhere close to what I was thinking listening to you, that you were just a performer. I think what the impression that I would have is that actually when you're talking about enjoying the performance, that is a way of communicating what's within, if that makes sense.
Yeah. The last few years I've been doing a Mark's Gospel. I started learning it, I think, back in 2014 or 15, and it took me a few years to sort of get it all in my head. But then I teamed up with a friend of mine called Frank McGregor, who's an actor and a lovely guy, and said, "Look, I've done this. I can't just do it for my own interest. I want to tell this to people." And
yeah,
we worked together, and he coached me, and we did all sorts of. We had curtains and lights and stage props and boxes, and we had a great trailer full of bump that we used to drag around, and it took 3 people with a combined age of over 180 to sort of kind of lugging all this gear around in the country and setting up. But that was really plugged into who I was, and I loved and still do. I love telling the story of Jesus in a way that brings it to life.
Yeah, I think there's a really good kind of example of the sense that I get of you, because Mark's Gospel isn't Howard telling Howard's story and thoughts. It is presenting the story of Jesus. So there is a sense in which you are both on stage but not on stage.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
it's not you. And it was good.
Yeah.
It's good. I took my youngest. Yeah, he was supposed to be in respite care, and I was going to come and watch, and he'd refused. So we were both there, and I thought, I'll blow it. I really want to come and see this. So we came along, and he was riveted by it and insisted that we needed to come back the next night. So we came twice.
Fantastic. Well, that's most gratifying. The thing is about that is, exactly as you say, really the exciting thing is the story of Jesus.
Yeah.
It's trying to get that across. When you watch royal things on the telly and they do the service in Westminster Abbey or whatever, and you get so-and-so up to do the reading,
Oh, they're awful.
I sit there saying, why didn't they ask me? Never mind, eh?
So I'm imagining you in your churches and things are growing and they're quite successful, and you go along to conferences and you meet with your fellow ministers, and I imagine that was quite a comfortable place to be, because
you imagine wrong.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It was purgatory. I used to come back from ministers' conferences, and Iona said, "Why did you do it to yourself? Why do you go to these things?" Because I would always come back mega depressed,
Right.
super depressed, because I would hear all these great stories and inspiring stories of these people who've done this, who've got this amazing ministry and doing this and doing that and doing the other. And I'd always listen to them and think, oh, I haven't done that. No, oh, I haven't done that.
So being part of a successful growing church did not make you immune to feeling that it was all a bit useless?
Oh, no. Absolutely not. And I'm just being honest, really. For me anyway, I'm a negative comparer. That's not a virtue. It's the opposite, really. But it's just one of the facts of my personality that I have to sort of try and deal with and try and I suppose grow through, really, because it's not a good thing. It's a bad thing, really. It's kind of saying to God, your work in me, it's not really very good, is it? It's a bit rude, really, isn't it? It's kind of saying, you're doing a great job with everybody else, but with me, no, I'm afraid you've got to pull your finger out, and it's not right. It's just not right.
Has it diminished, or is it still there?
It's still there somewhere, definitely. Like I said about, I have to realise that performing and that kind of thing is actually something that brings me joy, and it's a part of who I actually am as a person.
Yeah.
Well, this is also part of who I am as a person, but it's not a very good part. So everybody has different struggles, or a different cocktail of struggles, don't they? Yeah.
I think that's very true, and working out where our self-worth and our value comes from, letting go of that sense that it comes in having done the right kind of project or had the right kind of success.
Well, let me tell you, there's two super big churches in America, Saddleback Church and Willow Creek Church, and both of those guys, I mean, they just do this amazing job, and thousands, they've influenced literally millions, and they do this incredible work, and so of course I compare myself with them, don't I, and say, why aren't I Bill Hybels? And often the Lord has had to say to me, I'm very glad that there's one of him, but I'm also very glad there's one of you. I don't need you to be him, I need you to be you.
Yeah.
You don't have to do what these other people do. You have to do what I'm calling you to do.
You have to do Howard Jones.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Because you compare yourself, and you're never going to win that contest. It's like sort of a jogger in the park saying, "Why can't I be Usain Bolt?" kind of thing. But it's surprisingly hard to sort of shake off that, because I think our whole society is geared around this competitive, there is an up. And up is bigger, up is richer, up is sparklier. That is the direction to go. If that the whole thing of, I suppose, the Western world we live in is, whoever dies with the most toys wins what?
And we have a version of that in the Christian world, don't we? So whoever dies with the most church growth, with the largest number of books, with the best international speaking career,
or the most people who come to Christ through your ministry, and the most. If you have the kind of gifts and the kind of personality from God to be able to inspire and lead and enable a movement rather than, then for goodness sake, do it. Bless them. I'm glad that they're doing what they're doing. Genuinely, so, it's super. But I know that that's not a thing I could do.
So interestingly, Howard, given that you sort of have this sense of wanting a certain amount of success, you moved to Cobridge.
Correct.
What was the urge behind that? What was stirring in you?
Well, I think in part of our exploring stage, where we were sort of thinking about this whole concept of going somewhere with nothing, this is where we encountered urban expression.
Yeah.
And one of the things that really struck us, they did a presentation at the Heart of England Baptist Association Day, and we went to it. They had this map of the UK made out of floor tiles. They put all these like Jenga blocks and little blocks, and they just laid them out, and they said these are the areas of greatest poverty. And the areas of greatest need. But they said basically these are the places where the church is not absent, but these are not the areas of the greatest church presence. I said, think about that. Why is it that the church sort of tends to move to the suburbs and the,
and the posh places, which is where you'd been most of your Christian life?
Really where I've been. It's time to actually move somewhere. Now, I never thought of myself as posh, but I am. So I was brought up in the rich suburbs of London. My dad worked in the city. I went to public school. I absolutely no self-awareness of that. So on paper, I'm the very worst person in the world to come to a place like Cobridge. It is one of the poorer areas of Stoke-on-Trent. It's a place where people want to get out of.
Yeah.
But we love it. We just, it started really, we thought our sort of exploring around Stoke, moved to sort of Burslem, and then I found this house. We looked at it, and again it looked unpromising, but then we came here and we just knew that this was the place. It started with the house, really. This house, and then with the house comes the neighbourhood, because the whole thing about this is actually being genuinely part of a neighbourhood.
Yeah.
Being just moving in and living there as people. So that's what we decided to do. We decided, we felt that this was the place we had to be. So we moved here, and it's great. We've never regretted moving to Cobridge because we love this neighbourhood, and it, we still do. It still has a feeling of home to us. You always have to be aware of how can I put this, the motives that aren't very good. And I suppose you have to watch out for the sort of saviour complex.
Yes.
And it's not a good thing. And I'm quite sure that probably there was a little bit of that in me. I don't know, maybe, but we that there is a saviour, and it's not us. Our job is not to save this place. Our job is to live here and be here, and to attempt to be Christ to whoever it brings in our way, and whoever we meet, to try and just live an authentically Christian, humble, loving, helpful type of life with our neighbours, with people. That's kind of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Be a blessing. One of the stories in the Bible that got me here was the story of Abraham moving from a place where he was comfortable in Haran, and moving to a place that God would show him, and moving into this area called Canaan that he didn't know, where he knew no one. He was nothing, but God said, I will take you there, and I will bless you, and through you people will be blessed. And I suppose that if you ask us what urban expression Cobridge, what is it here to do? Be a blessing. Be a blessing to this neighbourhood. Yeah.
And what have been some of the signs of that blessing? What are some of the things that you look back or you look at and you think, yeah, we've made a difference there? Or is that the wrong phrase even?
I have to answer in categories that aren't part of the sort of church growth movement type of language, really. We're talking in terms of just encounters, people, many of whom we know and smile at, and some of whom we don't know so well now. Just because you, I think each person has the capacity to truly know and influence and be engaged and involved with a limited number of people.
Yeah.
So when we first moved here, I went up the road to the local primary school and said, well, one of the things I did was assemblies. I could do assemblies, do what you can do. So I moved out. I remember one time early on, our daughters got us 2 chickens, and so I thought, well, that'd be fun. So I took one of the chickens in when I did an assembly. And of course, being a chicken, it pooed on the floor, and the kids killed themselves laughing, and it was just terrific. I get 17, 18-year-old young men with beards come up to us. Hiya, you remember me? And I say, I'm afraid I don't. I was at school. You brought that chicken in, and it's a stupid thing, really. But there is sort of young people around Cobridge who walk down the street. They just smile at me because I suppose it's just using what I had.
Yes.
Made it that every so often in their school assembly was real fun, and they enjoyed it, and then we started a toddler group. I got involved in a little toddler group down at the community centre. Then that closed, and so thought, well, this place needs a toddler group, so we started one up, and it's still going, still thriving. So there's this constant stream of tiny children. So I spend a lot of my time singing the wheels on the bus and all that, and it's always very simple. And it's just people come in, the kids play with toys, we have some fruit and toast, and then do some songs. There's nothing religious, really. Once a year I'll do the Christmas story with teddy bears, which always goes down well. I've got a glove puppet of Zippy, who's always the innkeeper. Older people will know who that is. But you just get in at the ground floor of these little kids' lives, and their parents too, and just try and be a blessing to them. Yeah, there's people we know, people we have had relationship with, and who just I suppose in a quiet way we're able to say we've brought something of the Lord to them.
Yes,
I hope.
Yeah.
This is not a sort of exercise where you can score, where you can keep score. It's not very numbers based. And I suppose this was part of the struggle when we moved here.
Yeah.
Because for one thing, when you're a pastor, you're the pastor.
Yes.
Even it's within a fairly closed group, there is a definite status to that, and you're an important person. You're a person who people listen to, and people have to take into consideration. When we moved here, I moved from being that person to being absolutely nothing. Nobody at all. I remember still walking around the streets. I think I'd been up to the doctors and was walking back through one of the local estates and just thinking, what have I done? Who am I? I had a job. What am I doing here? I remember waking up with night sweats, thinking, I have no idea what I'm doing. I don't know if it's of any value or ever will be. And I suppose it sounds very good, we've become downwardly mobile. That sounds so impressive. What a Christian thing to do. But when you do it, you sort of think, well, with it goes that loss of status and knowing what on earth you're doing.
Yeah, because along with the status, actually, there are a number of things that you have to do if you're running a church. Earlier, we were talking about kind of rotas and organising things. You wake up on a Monday morning and you've got a to-do list, whereas here,
what do I do?
Isn't no to-do list.
So, I mean, we did all kinds of things in the community. We'd organise community picnics in the park and events out in the park. And we got very involved in the local community centre. The toddlers, we set up a youth club in the community centre, and a spin-off youth sports activity. We didn't do the sports, but I was there, and we were just turned up and got to know these young people and sort of butted heads with them a bit. I remember one time, a group of travellers came and parked their caravans on the football field out in Grange Estate, and oh my goodness, you'd think the worst thing in the world had happened. All kinds of prejudices and fears and everything came out. We just thought, well, we went home, we listened to all this stuff, and we went home and baked some cupcakes and took them to the traveller camp and said, we've just come round to bring you some cupcakes to say not everyone is not happy to see you. It's a cupcake, isn't it? It's not a huge thing. Where do you chalk that up on the scoreboard of church success? What did you do with your life? Well, I did give a cupcake to someone. It doesn't sound that amazing. And then we said, this is the football. If you moved over to that area of the field over there, people could have their football pitch back, and that might help. So they took our suggestion, actually.
Wow.
And I think some of the local people started a bit of a football match with some of the youngsters. But, I mean, they weren't there very long. They were there for a wedding, and they were there for a couple of days and moved off again. But it was, I don't know if what we did was very much, but it a bit of pouring oil on troubled waters and trying to be a quiet, peaceful influence. It just seemed like that was the thing for us to do.
Takes a bit of courage, though, I think, to go round and hand cupcakes to a group of people that you don't know.
I didn't think about it. We didn't think about it. We just thought that the people.
Yeah.
They're just people. And most people, if you approach them genuinely and humbly and not in a kind of cheesy grin type of way, and just say hello, they respond quite.
How has your view of God and Jesus shifted, do you think, in these 14 years?
I would sum it up as radical acceptance. That's one of the things you observe in the gospel.
Yeah.
Jesus hung out with all the wrong people, and he just ruthlessly, almost showed them this radical acceptance. He really did take them as they were. So he had a tax collector, he had a proto-terrorist, Simon the Zealot. They were sort of like what some people called a terrorist group. He had Judas.
Yes.
He chose Judas. He chose a people who no one really had the time of day for. He touched lepers. He touched dead people. He broke the taboos everywhere in order to show this radical acceptance of people.
Yeah.
I just think that our world at the moment is polarized and becoming increasingly polarized. It's becoming increasingly binary.
Yeah.
You know, you are either for Team A or Team B, and whichever way you go, Team A or Team B is the good guys, and the other are the devil. And social media is all over this because they've monetized it, because it makes them billions and billions of dollars in advertising. It's far more profitable to get people into two camps filled with fear and hatred and resentment, shouting obscenities at each other, because it generates the clicks. That's the world we live in. That's the political world we live in. People just don't talk to each other anymore. They shout at each other or threaten to kill each other. And I'm afraid to say that the church is often involved in that. It's not part of the solution. And I suppose that radical acceptance of Jesus, that's I'd say the kingdom seed, the kingdom principle.
Yeah.
He told that story of the little mustard seed that you planted in the ground, and it looks like absolutely nothing, and it grows and becomes the biggest of all the plants, and the birds of the air make their nests in its branches. There's something in that, isn't there? So I think that the radical acceptance of God for people, his willingness to love and care for them and affirm them is it's not that I've never thought that before. I guess I've always thought it, but it's become stronger and deeper and more important.
Yes.
More central.
Yeah. 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 From what you said, you've worked to model that and to be Jesus in that in this community in that way. I wonder if you've also been on the receiving end of that radical acceptance. You
mean from people?
Yeah.
Yeah.
As a posh boy from
yes. That's absolutely. I thought what there's absolutely no point trying to hide my accent or myself or try to pretend to be something. People just they accept me. We're so grateful for our neighbours, our next door neighbours. The white, Stokey, been here for forever.
Yeah. And
we absolutely love them. We during lockdown we had a sort of tea over the garden wall. we had to be socially distanced, but if I cooked some scones, we just had tea. So and they're just brilliant neighbours, and we accept them, they accept us, and it's wonderful. Our next door neighbours the other way is a very large Muslim family, all sorts of interesting things going on in their lives. We absolutely love them, and they're brilliant neighbours. They're absolutely wonderful to have them as neighbours, and they love having us as neighbours, and we make them laugh, and when the chips are down. I remember one time one of the children was, it was a kind of call the doctors out type of ill, and one of the girls came and said, "Would you come?" We just went in, sat with them, comforted them, prayed with them, and then came back home again. It was just like nice, and
yes.
Different relationships, but yeah, accepted, and it's great.
I wonder if there are things that the people that you have spent time with and been in community with around here, are there things that you think you've learnt from them?
Oh, yes, of course. I mean, I think just the experience of living here, that's been the life lesson. So all of them are to thank.
Yes.
It's not that, oh yes, person A taught me this valuable life, and person B, said this, then I thought, It's more that just the experience, I think, of living in this place and being part of it and doing life this way has been an incredibly good life lesson.
In what ways do you think you have changed and grown?
I think I've relaxed a bit more. I think I've learned I'm learning, still learning, that the value of the little and the unspectacular. I mean, we grandparents now, we've got a wonderful, wonderful little 5.5-year-old granddaughter who's just the joy of our lives, and being able to be with her, to be like her safe space, that this house is a safe space for her, a happy space. That's incredibly important. That singing the wheels on the bus with the toddler group, and then seeing Jesus, we're looking at arguing, bickering disciples, saying, who's the greatest? Who's the greatest? I'm the greatest. No, you're not. I'm the greatest. I'm the greatest. And he said, what you been arguing? What were you arguing about? He says, they all kept quiet because they'd been arguing about who was the greatest. So he takes a little child, one of our toddlers, and brings this little person up and says, if you accept one of these little ones in my name, then you accept me. You welcome me. And if you welcome me, you're not just welcoming me, you're welcoming the one who sent me. You want to be great? Look at these little guys. I can remember back in my church days, toddler group, the background thinking is always, but how can we get these people to church? How can we use this to enable these people to come to proper church? And actually, I kind of think, well, why isn't this church? This is, in a sense, we're having church, but we're not. There isn't a sermon, there isn't a Bible reading, there isn't prayer time, but we're welcoming and accepting and loving these parents and carers and grandparents and their kids, and as we do that, we welcome Jesus.
Yes. It means that you can value the encounter that you're actually having with somebody and experience that at a deeper level when you've not also got this subtext running in the back of your mind, which is, okay, well, this is all right, this conversation, but where's it going? How do I move
it to the one I really want? That I really ought to have?
Yeah.
Well, there's lots of ought in there, isn't there?
There is a lot of ought in there.
But then, I don't want to say in this to the churches that are doing a different thing, oh, you're doing it all wrong, everyone ought to do it like me.
No.
I just think that this is the way I've got to be, and we've got to be. But I mean, the kingdom is bigger than the church, and the church is bigger than what it looks.
Yes. Thank you, Howard. That's been great.
You are entirely welcome.
Hope you enjoyed this episode of the Loved Called Gifted podcast. If you'd like to get in touch, you can email lovedcalledgifted@gmail.com. You can find a transcript of this podcast at lovedcalledgifted.com. And that's also the place to go if you're interested in the Loved Called Gifted course, or if you'd like to find out about spiritual direction or coaching. Thank you for listening.